It's now 8 o'clock, and we'll convene the Public Protection and Judiciary Committee. Roll call.
Paul Burning.
Present.
Bob Fiedler.
Present.
Daniel Hansen.
Present.
Kathy Leaf.
Present.
Shelley Tomczyk.
Thanks, everybody, for being with us. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting?
I move to approve the minutes.
Dan Hansen motions. Would you have a second?
Second.
Paul Burning, second. Thank you, Shelley, for joining us. And without objection, they're approved. Any public comment today? Any public comment? No public comment. Our business items. Our financial report is first up on the agenda, and I'll call on our County Administrator, Ken Witt.
Thank you, Chair. When we look at the financial information, we're looking at the end of November. November is a really good month to take a look where we were at November last year, because we're most of the way through the year, so we have most of the data in here. December gets a little bit more skewed at the end because we extend December out really to about March 15th. So December is harder to evaluate when we're looking at December numbers a month from now. So November is really the best month to see where we are comparably. And when we look through the report, I don't have any red flags to point out to you. Everyone is staying within their budgeted range, especially now that we've gotten that last grant application that we applied some of the expense overages over the year back to all of their departments. So everyone's sitting pretty good. And when you look at the prior year, even where we were at November, most of the departments are really within range there too of where we were. So we should finish the year very well off. I don't have any departments offhand that I've signaled as a red flag that's going to be way over budget. Are there any specific questions on the financial reports?
Open for any questions. That was quick. Thank you, Mr. Witt. Carl Anderson, our new district attorney, who was sworn in yesterday, or day before yesterday, is not able to be with us today because he's got court this morning, and that's a good excuse. But he will be with us at our February meeting to give an overview of the district attorney's office and introduce himself to us. So with that, I'd like to turn to our circuit court update. Judge.
There's not really a lot new. It's more trying to figure out how we continue to manage and deal primarily with COVID. We've had more positive cases both in the clerk's office as well as in our judicial assistant offices. Unfortunately, they're oftentimes family members, which requires the quarantining and then some additional time to make sure that they're not positive themselves. But again, with the thanks to the courts, to Mr. Witt and IT, we were able to purchase some laptop computers, which now permits those staff to work remotely from home, which has never been the case before. And so we have been pretty much filling our holes in the dike as best we can with as many digits as we can find. Jury trials we continue to suspend except for those that are statutorily or constitutionally required. We really don't have a fear about one-day trials, but our concern certainly is for multi-day trials and what can happen between day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4 with jurors who may have those same contacts and those same exposures. So we're going to review it here mid-month and see what our plans are going forward, but that is at least continue to be on hold. The biggest issue that occurred yesterday afternoon is continuing today is our CCAP, our circuit court automation protocols are down, so we don't have computers that are working, and we have no access to files, we have no access to our calendars. So we've been flying by the seat of our pants since yesterday afternoon. I was really hopeful this morning we would come in and all would be well, but I tried logging in before I came down, and we still do not have access. So with a totally e-file system, we are literally operating blind. We were able, yesterday, computers worked a little bit on and off in some of the offices, at least to print calendar, so we have printed calendar, so I know what my calendar is today. But it's impossible, and
Judge,
we will do what we can do, but it harkens me back to the days where we had paper files, and I didn't have to worry about any of this.
Judge, when did the failure occur?
We were told yesterday that 2 fiber optic lines were cut, one in Wisconsin, one in Minnesota. Both Comcast, I believe, Charter Communications. Whether it's coincidental, I have no idea how lines would be cut in 2 states contemporaneously almost. But we also got an email late last night saying they had repaired the fiber optic line and all should be good. Well, as I said, when I logged in at 7:50, we didn't have access. We could not get into our files. We couldn't get into anything. So we are without service, but we'll continue to limp along. My fear is that with every criminal defendant who's in my court, I always like them to walk out of court with a date in hand so that they know when they're supposed to come back to court. Well, we won't be able to do that because I can't access my calendar. I don't know. And people move, they're transient, and so this could have a cascading effect going forward. But it's our new world of technology and reliance on technology, and when it works, it's great. When it's not working, it causes the problems that we're having. So that's my report, and I wish it were more positive, but we're trying to do what we can do.
Well, it was positive when you noted something you brought up at the last meeting about the lack of computers for some of the staff, that you now have them and they can work efficiently. So that's a plus. Thank you, Mr. Witt. And
Albeit those
Judge,
that are working remotely today can't work, so
that's
anyway.
right. Judge, just if I could ask just one very general question. I don't want you to have to spend a long time answering, because I'm sure that there's a lot of things you could say. But as a result of the COVID, I know we've had a lot of issues, but you folks have been very creative, and technology has come to the fore. In many, many cases, it's worked quite well. Just looking into your crystal ball for the future, do you think we're going to see some good, positive, efficient ways of doing business that also render justice?
Yes, and in fact, there is pending in front of our Supreme Court a petition to modify our rules associated with use of video conferencing as an alternative. Prior to COVID, there were very few court proceedings we could conduct remotely. People had to be in person in court. As a result of COVID, we were forced, obviously, to look at alternatives, and now those alternatives are proving to work in some situations. So there is a petition that will permit greater use of video conferencing for certain hearings. We're really hopeful that one area will be mental commitments, so we don't have to transport people from Winnebago or Mendota, for an hour hearing and then transport them back. The trauma of the transport, the time it takes the sheriff's department, the expenses.
Judge, you actually anticipated my next question, was what impact it would have on that specific thing. Thank you.
So that's included in the petition in front of the court. Now, I think they're having their public hearings in February. So if they approve the petition, there may be opportunity here to at least look at ways to conduct court remotely in certain situations, but also the humanity of what we do in some other situations may be improved as well.
Are there any other questions for Judge Needham? I don't see any hands up. So again, thank you very much, Judge. We appreciate everything.
I think Mr. Anderson's case is my case.
Thank you, Judge. Mike O'Keefe will give the Community Justice Collaborating Council updates. And maybe, Mike, if you would take about a minute when you start out, We're in a new year. There may be folks listening that aren't familiar with the CJCC. Could you just give a quick overview of what that is and then give the report specifically as you wanted to?
Yes, the Community Justice Collaborating Council is it's oversight body for all the justice systems in our county. We really strive to improve our operations. Continuous improvement is something that probably in the past is not what we looked at in the criminal justice system. We always just kept doing business. We never looked for opportunities to continuous improvement, just like your standard industry would do. So we meet every other month. We have subcommittees that meet too. We have 18 members. We have community members. We have all department heads, HHS, district attorney, judicial, county board supervisors attend. And again, it's more of a collaboration process for us to get in one room and really talk about issues. And to be quite honest with you, we do it in a very civil manner, even when we disagree. So I think that's a plus. When we started out, there was a lot of mistrust between departments at times. And I think we've learned to overcome that and at least work through it. So that's just a quick overview of the CJCC. It's been in existence since 2013.
Thank you.
So I don't have a lot for CJCC. I would like to announce that next week we have our council meeting on Thursday at 8:00 a.m. in this room. I am going to put Bob Rarrett as part of our agenda item next week, our HHS director. Something he said yesterday kind of triggered me for him to give a shout out. We're running into problems with foster care placements again. Not surprising, and I think Mr. Klatt would attest to this than any other law enforcement that methamphetamine arrests are going through the roof. They're up for sure, and that doesn't take into account heroin and cocaine and other drugs. But usually when you run into that situation in a home, the children are usually removed to foster care, and we're running into problems with placements. So Bob's going to talk a little bit about that. I am also going to put in the packet, and I talked to the sheriff about this, their annual report. I think it was probably the most comprehensive annual report I've seen in quite a long time, and I think it really summarized, what's been going on in the sheriff's department in 2020. So I think it's worth reading, and I hope that people, take the time to read that. When I put it in there, it's 80 pages, but very good information. I know the supervisors have seen it already. So other than that, we'll wait and see what we'll have a lengthy agenda. Right after our meeting, we do have a treatment court oversight subcommittee meeting. We have our treatment court, which is a kind of a bifurcated program. We have an OWI program and a drug court program. And every 4 months, we have an oversight team that kind of meets to make sure that we're on track to meet our goals. So we're going to meet immediately after our CJCC meeting. And I'm hoping that since the CJCC meeting is live streamed now, that we can maybe reach out in the community and talk about these foster care placement issues. And I know there's some things going on to address that, and I think Bob will talk more about that.
I apologize, but when was the date of the CJC meeting?
January 14th
January 14th, in this room.
in this room.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. O'Keefe?
I have a question, and I'm sure Mr. O'Keefe is not the possibly the one to answer it, but do you know of any, how are they addressing obtaining more foster parents, basically?
Well, I think in the past, with my recollection, best of my recollection, they did look at ways to, I hate to use the word advertise, but we looked at areas where the need was greatest, and then we focused our resources in that area. So, for instance, if we got a lot of children in the Richmond area that are going into foster care, we put our resources into advertising in that area rather than countywide. It doesn't make sense sometimes to take children out of a home and then put them in Glenwood City, and they have to go to a whole new school system. And and I got an email from Bob Rarrett this morning. It looks like they're going to look at this issue on a regional level. It looks like he's going to start meeting with other HHS directors in the area and kind of maybe pool our resources and share resources, hopefully. So Bob will talk more about that at our CJCC meeting. If you'd like to zoom in on that, I can send you the link to that too.
I would appreciate that. And then the other issue regarding like fostering, I know it's much easier to find placements for, the elementary or younger. Everybody wants the babies. So maybe somebody can talk about ways that they're trying to encourage people to take like the older kids or the sibling groups. Again, I know not for something you can answer now, but just putting it out there.
That's a good point, and I think Bob does have that on his list to talk about. The other thing we're going to talk about the CJCC meeting is Casa Program, which would definitely tie into that foster care placement issue. That's a court-appointed special advocates. We're trying to start that program in this county. Ran into a few stumbling blocks with that, but it's picking up steam again, and we have a meeting on Friday that should give us direction as which way we're going to go. We have two choices. We can either become an independent CASA model for St. Croix County or part of Barron County, CASA of Western Wisconsin, which is in Barron County. We're not sure which one would fit our need the best right now. The judges are kind of working on that. So
I know the latter issue has been something of great concern, really, to Judge Needham, I think. And so you think they'll resolve it this Friday?
yeah, I think they will, yes.
Right. Supervisor Hanson had a question.
Yeah, no, I just need to remember how to work the computer.
Okay.
I'm going to try to make the meeting, but if I don't, I was wondering if the outreach for new foster homes involved going to faith communities. I'm not, I can see that there might be problems with that too, being a government function, but people who may have opened their hearts to the idea of having a foster child may also be people who participate in the faith communities. So just thought in a question, and would you please send me a link as well for that meeting? I appreciate it.
I will do.
Mr. Chair,
Sheriff Knudsen? Did you, Sheriff Knudsen?
yeah, Mike O'Keefe, Susan Caparelli also has tendered her resignation from the board. Is that going to be, was that a public, a citizen panel member?
Susan was acting in capacity as an advisory member. She's been pretty instrumental in a couple of our subcommittees, especially the domestic violence subcommittee. She's taken the job as the CJCC coordinator in Polk County, and her replacement is Bridget Warren, is the interim acting executive director, and she'll be attending our meetings and also functioning as an advisory member. Yes, thanks for reminding me.
Are there any other questions for Mr. O'Keefe? Seeing none, we'll turn to Sheriff Knudsen for his report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a lot. I obviously at the county board meeting on Tuesday morning presented my end of the year report, statistics and activities from the office. So we can delve further into that or any further questions. I'll touch upon one thing that Judge Needham had talked about was looking forward to, and I hope that helps us and we get some movement there, is that transporting of those individuals that are emergency detention or mental health. I think the number, and I apologize, I'm working from home today. Also another thing that Judge Needham had talked about was close contact incidences. So I'll be out of the office for a little bit, but I believe we had 18 transports last year. And those transports that I mentioned as far as emergency detentions, those were ones that were brought to court that had been held down at a mental health facility. and needed to be back within that 72 hours for a hearing. The sheriff's office itself had 14, I believe, off the top of my head, that we had taken down. So, and some of those 14 may have been released prior to that 72 hours after an assessment. But there were 18, those included all throughout the county agencies that had transport, to include the sheriff's office, maybe also a couple from the jail that had to be brought back. So the 18 that we talked about was not solely for our office, but it was actually solely for the court. So just a little clarification on that as I reviewed through that. I'll turn it back and then I'll go into the annual inspection, but any other questions or comments or clarifications that now maybe had a little bit more time to digest some of that information from Tuesday? Yeah, if not, thank you. The annual inspection under chapter 5954, parent 15, it discusses the annual inspection, and that's under the public protection. I'm going to read through it because there's some questions that I needed clarification from Corporation Counsel. At least once every year, the board of each county or committed thereof shall visit, inspect, or examine each jail maintained by the county as to health, cleanliness, and discipline. And the keeper of the jail shall lay before the board or the committee a calendar setting forth the name, age, and cause of committal of each prisoner. If it appears to the board or committee that any provisions of law have been violated or neglected, the board or the committee shall immediately give notice of the violation to the district attorney of the county. For several years now, February has been the time that we've done our annual jail inspection. Obviously, this year it throws us quite a curveball, but it talks about once every year. So that we're doing it in February was only because we had always done it in February. We still have 2021 to get it complete. So we have some time for our current social virus position to ease up a little bit. And I know doing it next month is probably not the opportune time for some to gather and walk into the jail. So I can appreciate that. And, I'll defer to, obviously, as society goes, how things open up and when people feel comfortable. One of the things in there as well that I just want to mention on that statute, and the keeper of the jail shall lay before the board of the committee a calendar setting forth the name, age, and cause or committal of each prisoner. That was the part I had to contact Corporation Counsel and say, what does that mean? Lay before you a calendar. I spoke with Heather Wolski, and their reading would probably be, and it would be, when they talk about calendar, we would go back to 2020 or up until the date that we actually have the inspection. So if we do a July 15th, we could, upon your request, run, I believe, a roster in setting up a crystal report of name, age, and cause of committal for the year prior. And I believe if that's something that you would like, that'll give us time to prepare to try to get our previous RMS system. Maybe by that time we'll be into our new RMS system. It'll be easier for us to search those three categories. I know with our current RMS system that we are on, from the one from 98, creating a crystal report of this may be a little more difficult, but we could get it done. Now it's something that we've never done, because it was actually this year where Janet and I were looking at this going, what does that truly mean? And I want to make sure we are responsive and fall within the parameters of that subsection that we are providing what's required or requested. So if you guys so desire to have a list of those three, I would probably need to have that in advance, that is the request that's made, just so I can get those parameters set and get you a print. Again, jumping back to my yearly report, I think we had 22, maybe over 2,200 this year that were booked in 2020, and in 2019 was 2,800. So just know that there would be that list of those individuals, or that size of a list that I would somehow have to prepare and present to you, which that's not a big deal, but I just need some time to get that accomplished, so.
Sheriff, if I could
Mr. Chair,
jump
I'll
in
defer back.
for just a second and take up some of the points you raised. I think it would be the consensus of the committee that we do recognize the time we're in and that we probably can very easily defer the jail inspection for several months until everybody pretty much concludes it's safe to go down there for you, the inmates, and the members of the staff and board that would go down there. I don't mean to speak for the committee as a whole, but does anybody on the committee, does everybody kind of agree with that approach? Does anybody disagree with that approach? So, Sheriff, I think what we'll do is we'll leave it on as an open item, and maybe in April or so we can talk about it, maybe shoot for something like June, if that seems to be a good time. And if that seems to be, needs to be deferred further, we can do that. As you say, we've got the year to do it in. I have participated in a number of jail inspections in the past. They've been very thorough. You were very modest in saying you hadn't provided a roster such as you described in the past, but my goodness, you just certainly provided everything else that could possibly be needed. We looked in every room and every, I want to say, shower stall down there, and we certainly got an open and full and complete report from you and had records open for us to inspect when we were down there. Relative to the report you asked the Corp Counsel about, I certainly don't want to interfere with anything that he would suggest to you that has to be done. But I would guess that also, since I don't know that anybody wants to create work for your office other than what would be a basic reflection of what's happening down there. So I would just say, work with the corporate counsel on it as to what has to be done legally. But I don't believe, if anybody objects, please let me know, that we don't want you to spend an inordinate amount of time putting it together for us. Not hearing any objection,
All right,
Jeff.
thank you. Yeah, and we print up jail. No, that's fine. We print up jail rosters every day so it's, the information is available. But in that whole year long, we've actually never compiled that to see what sort of data that would use or the layout and numbers of pages that would be. So I appreciate that. But again, that offer is out there that if you so desire, I will comply with that request.
Are there any other questions for the sheriff? Again, as was mentioned earlier, Sheriff, thank you for your very complete report. Appreciated it. You were open to a lot of questions at the county board meeting 2 days ago, so we don't have as many today as we might have had. Thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from another representative from the Sheriff's Department, Captain Jeff Klatt. Jeff chairs the Traffic Safety Committee, and I don't know that this committee has ever heard from that entity, but I attend their meetings, and I found them extremely interesting about the coordination between the various law enforcement entities in the state and municipalities and the county, and how they work with our highway people to make our highways safe. I'll turn it over to Captain Klatt.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Like the chair said, I've been in charge of that committee now, I think, for 10 years, and it's actually a state statute required committee under 83.013. And if you look at, I think it's page 28 or 29 with the member list, all those members you see on that list are required by statute except for the 2 county board supervisors, the citizen member, and the emergency management manager. The 2 county board members, I believe, are required by the county board bylaws, one from the transportation committee, and then one from public protection. And then the county administrator can appoint whomever else he feels should be in that committee. In that case, we had our former county administrator, him and I decided that, and we've always had our emergency management manager on that committee, and then the other citizen member who is a former highway commissioner, we thought he would be a very good pick on that since he had been with the county for almost 30 years, I think it was, and knows these roads in and out. That's the makeup of that committee. It's also made up of a representative from the State Patrol, representative from is an engineer out of the Eau Claire office of the DOT, and then a member from the Transportation Safety out of the DOT. It also requires a member of the discipline of law, discipline of medicine, and the discipline of education. And with those, we have Carl Anderson, who's a DA for the county, J.R. Dockel, who is the Principal and Transportation Director from the Baldwin-Woodville School District, and then Matt Melby, who was the Director for the Richmond Area Ambulance. And that basically makes up our committee, those committee members. On packet number, page 28, I actually found some stats that went back to 1960 on traffic fatalities. So we got traffic fatalities all the way up from 1960 to 2020, and how many we've had in the county, or in the county anyway, for those last 50, 60 years. The state uses their average is about a 5-year average is what they look at when it comes to traffic data and traffic crash data. And basically we've been down in the single digits except for 2019 where we had 13. And if I looked right, I think we had a triple fatality that year and a double fatality. So that kind of put our stats up into the teens again. I got a couple more just graphs down there on the St. Croix County crashes from 2020 that has basically all the crashes up to about mid-December, and that's on a dot map that's required by the state, who now actually does that for us via our track system, our accident reporting data system, and they can plot all those for us. And then the other interesting one was, the next one was all the car deer crashes we've had in the county last year, which is a ton. They just keep popping up all over. And if it wasn't for deer, we would be half of our crashes is what accounts for about half of our crashes is our car deers. I know with some of the stuff that we review, we're supposed to meet quarterly. However, with the COVID thing, I think we met once last year. And but we go over traffic crash data, we go over fatalities within the county and other traffic-related matters. And one of the bigger traffic-related matters we've had now recently was the intersection with the Quick Trip at exit 128, or at exit 28 on Highway 128, where they've been having it's somewhat of an odd exit and entrance into the system, into the Quick Trip, but when you leave the Quick Trip, if you don't know where you're going, which most of the out-of-state people at that point don't, they go down and make a U-turn in the middle of the roadway, and we've had people crash into each other right there. And the state has been working on that. We did some improvements to that because we actually had semis try to make U-turns in the middle of the road, and they put up some barriers. They put up no U-turn signs. It's made it better. It hasn't gotten down to where it should be yet because we think we've had 5 crashes or 6 crashes there now within the last year. And I just talked to the highway engineer a couple weeks ago, and he says that they've had discussion on that intersection, and they have some improvements that they're discussing with his higher ups right now to see what they could do with that. Otherwise, we've had citizens come up into meetings and voice some concerns that we've looked at. When our current highway commissioner was hired, one of the things that he had learned from Chippewa County is if you see those red markers, strips of reflective tape on stop signs, and then the yellow ones on like the stop head signs, he brought those from Chippewa County, which is make I think a big difference in some of the intersection crashes we've had, because you get that extra reflective visual to see that something's coming up. So that was one thing he brought. Him and I discuss things all the time. If somebody brings up something with him, or somebody complains to me about something, we go back and forth and try to actually get a solution even before we have meetings on it. So some of that stuff we already have taken care of before we even discuss it.
I'm amazed when I've attended your meetings. You talk about every crash that's occurred. You have visuals of the intersection or the part of the highway where they've occurred. You've got incredible data that you have available to review with all the members of the committee about the people involved, the types of equipment involved, the speeds involved. It's just an amazing amount of work that you do to try to keep abreast of where we have a problem and what to do about it.
That's great. And come down to it, I review every single crash that comes through the county, at least through our office. And most of the crashes we've had are some type of human error or driver error. It's usually, there's a couple that could be compelled with some type of safety issue on the roadway, but most of them are inattentive driving and or some type of a speed violation is what we've been seeing lately now anyway. Whether it's actually speeding or it just snowed 2 inches and I didn't adjust my speed for how slippy the road was and I slid off the road or slid into somebody else. So, we have any questions?
We have a question. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the report. You said that half of the crashes were approximately related to deer. How many of them would you say have alcohol involved?
That I could look that up. I could get that information for you. That's easily gotten. I just did not look that up today.
I just know, and we're in Wisconsin, and we all know our culture and the embeddedness of alcohol in our culture here. So I'm just kind of curious because, you talk about education and it goes hand in hand with your job, obviously, and making sure people make good choices, right?
Correct.
Supervisor Burning.
Regarding the Highway 128-94 intersection, I noticed that, so my in-laws live out that way, and we go out there occasionally, and I did notice that it is, even as someone that's been out there and understands the layout, like when I first started going out there, there may have been a U-turn made by my 07 Saturn Ion at the time. So I can see how that could be a major issue. And I see it all the time, even with the Quick Trip in Hudson, where they put the entrance only to be used as an exit as some see fit. So do they have a timeline on getting that remedied? Because it is a bad situation. And I watch it when I'm out there because that's usually where I stop and get gas. So.
No, we've been working on that for probably 3 years, I think, since you've come on that committee, and they've always tried to do the least financial impact for an upgrade to try to mitigate that. So we've tried one thing that somewhat works. Then they keep on trying something else, and that works a little bit better. So hopefully by our next meeting, which I believe is scheduled for January or February, hopefully we'll have an answer as to when something might be happening with that intersect or that area anyway.
Supervisor Hanson.
I'd make a couple of comments. First, I think you guys do a great job and have a great presence. I travel between New Richmond and Hudson routinely, and I don't think I can make the trip without seeing a sheriff's deputy, and it always comforts me to see you out there. How frequently, just out of curiosity, do you have accidents between a vehicle and a not automotive vehicle, like a snowmobile or a farm implement or a bicycle? These county roads are so packed. How frequent are those types of accidents?
Those are pretty infrequent. We usually have more farm vehicles with a motor vehicle than I think maybe we had one bike, I think, last year. I don't believe we had any pedestrians that I can recall offhand, so most of it's farm implements. And they're not that frequent.
Are there any other questions for Captain Clatter? And I see you're just wrapping things up.
For Supervisor Leaf, I just looked it up. We've had 113 crashes that had some type of alcohol involvement.
Thank you.
I have one more. What about the ATV use on the Township Roads? That's been going on for some years. Have there been any problems, or is that going pretty well?
That seems to be going pretty well. We've had, I believe, one crash with an ATV with a motor vehicle within the last 3 years. So that's actually been going way better than I thought it ever was, or ever would.
I remember the last meeting I attended, there was quite a discussion on ATVs. There always is for about 15 to 20 minutes of this meeting. But one of the things I found fascinating was the discussion of tires on ATVs. and the fact that many folks are using ATVs with very thin tires that are not designed to be used at the speeds they're using them at, and several of the folks are very concerned that we might see some accidents in the future relative to tires on ATVs.
And we probably, yes, I would agree. We probably would say you got those stubby tires that are not meant for the roadway.
Anything else, Captain Cliff?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Sheriff.
I just want to also add, and Captain Klatt and I discussed this, as we look at some of these statistics, but probably one of the most glaring, and people either love them or hate them, but roundabouts. We've added more roundabouts in 10 years. Supervisor Leaf hasn't, I don't know what she said, but she said something.
I hate roundabouts.
It's in those areas, and it's really around Roberts and Richmond, and then obviously over to the Four Corners. But those areas that those were put in were high injury crash areas. Now, while there still are some crashes that occur at those intersections, they are low speed, low impact, minor injury. So that is really one of the things that the Traffic Safety Committee has also looked at. And now, as we get a few years under our belt after the roundabouts are in, I think we'll be looking at the data before and after to see how effective in reduction of injury crashes those are. And Jeffrey and I discussed that at length on some of the pros of those. So thank you.
Are there any other questions for Captain Klatt? And did you complete your presentation? Okay, thank you so much for being with us. Now I'd like to turn to our medical examiner, Patty Shackner, and I just noticed, Patty, you're at the end of the agenda. We should have some mechanism where next time we move you to the beginning of the agenda so you don't have to sit with us through the whole meeting before you get to speak. But our medical examiner, Patty Shackner.
Thank you, Supervisor. I just wanted on record, I love roundabouts. I think they're awesome.
Okay, we can. I get it.
Oh, kill. I included our year-end report. We haven't really done a really big deep dive, which we're working on now and hope to have ready for the Health and Human Services meeting coming up this month. There are some really interesting things that we have seen, and you can tell that our caseload has increased significantly, 37% over last year, and our scene investigations increased by 43%. That there is really on trend with what we've been talking about. Right now in St. Croix County, we have about 17,000 people over the age of 65. And none of them are going to win the race, so they're all going to be, coming through our office. And when you think about that, that's planning. I mean, we have to plan on that. So I don't know if we're going to continue to see a 30% increase in our call volume, but I am planning that this year we will hit to 1,000 cases. So that there, I just want you to be prepared for before we even start. The reason that that COVID has impacted our department, but not enough to skew these numbers, So that there, I think, is the aging population is going to have a lot to do with how we plan for the future. And if you look at the slide with the 5-year caseload trend, you can see the increase in how it happened. Our cremation rate, I don't think that'll ever go down. I think that'll stay at 72% and continue to rise. You can see the different reasons for reporting. I think the interesting thing that we can start looking at, if you go down to the slide on the trends for the whole year on the cause and manner of death, you'll see the interesting thing for not natural. If you look at the suicide numbers, we did not have an increase in suicide during this year. What we did see, and I've been talking to my colleagues in other counties, was a 90% decrease in suicide in teenagers. So that's very concerning for us. So we started doing a little research on if this was a natural thing that everyone was seeing, and it is something that everybody's seeing. So once we go back to school and everything goes back to normal, which I anticipate that's what it'll be, those suicide numbers will be right back in our face. And there's a lot, and we've already got a lot of statistics as to why they're going to be in our face. And the mental health professionals are saying tsunamis are the words that they're using for suicide increasing as we move forward. So we really have to do a deep dive in mental health, and especially for young people. That is something that we are very concerned about. And, you know, it says a lot about atmosphere and everything and pressures and the stuff that goes on with children, and also access and means. So we're really going to work on talking about educating, because I've been doing this work for a long time, and when it comes to suicide, and especially suicide with children, the blame goes to the policymakers. So I think we need to come back and really think about how we are going to, because it's so sporadic, and it always is, what didn't you do? What didn't the school do? What didn't, and so we have an opportunity to start doing some education to parents and young people now on the front end of this, before this here trend really starts looking the way.
If I could interrupt for just 1 second, I think Supervisor Tomczyk had a question.
Yes.
I did, thank you. I didn't want to speak over you. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that there is a concern that we have a 90% decrease in?
It was, yes. The reason that it's a concern is that it was glaring. So what is the only difference between 2019 and 2020? The glaring difference is that most kids were learning from home. So that tells you that, you know, the pressure, where is the pressure? The pressure is in the building. So we know that. And so when you see that big of a number, and when I talked to my other colleagues, we all said the same thing. You know, yes, we have suicides. Yes, we do. Our numbers did not change. But that number was a glaring change that you cannot ignore. So it's something that once we've seen that, it is something that we really, from a public health perspective, we have to think about on how we're going to address this, because our teenage suicides was consistent, and last year we had 3 within 6 weeks at the beginning of 2020 and the end of December and beginning of January. So we know that this is something that normally happens, but the fact that we haven't seen it like we did in the past is concerning, because it tells us where the answers are. So the education piece to that is going to be huge.
Okay, I thought that's what you were saying, and I was like, I hope that we're not saying once they're back in school that the rate of suicide will go up, but that is what you're saying.
That is what I'm saying. Yeah, that is what I'm saying. In that,
Thank you.
and it's a pretty clear data point. So it means that all of us have to have some meaningful conversations. It's showing us that you know, there's lots of things that we can do to address this and inform people, because it doesn't do any good if we see the data, know what it says, and we don't share it. So,
Thank you.
Supervisor Burney.
So do we have, like, with incidences in the past with teenage suicide, do we have, I'm assuming well, I shouldn't assume, I'm asking if we have data points that show what the factors were leading up to, and is there like a conglomeration of all of that to show, like, okay, we know what the 2019, 2020 difference is, how does that play into these 17 different things, of which 7 are dominantly the factors that lead to a teenage suicide or pre-adult suicide?
that's the thing where we got to really do some real deep dives. There's trauma, of course, childhood trauma. There's addiction. There's mental health issues. There's environmental. What's it like for that individual in that place? You know, so there's a lot of different things. This really, and we know that. We know that with adolescent and childhood suicide, that access and means and the fact that it's so impulsive, that the emotional intelligence isn't there. You know, it's not there to know that that is going to be lethal. They're still thinking, okay, this really sucks today, so I'm going to do this now, and then tomorrow it'll be better. And they don't understand that this decision or act, you know, is permanent. So that is the big thing. So a couple of years ago it's been about 5 years ago, we did a really big push on suicide prevention and with the Suicide Prevention Task Force, and we're doing some talking on different things that we can do again to really start ramping it up. I would rather see us do it on the front end in an educational thing, and utilize, you know, maybe even utilize some of our tools that we have here with video and stuff, and get some of our county board members to do videos and just really ramp up that type of a presence. So, you know, and start a marketing campaign now and really work on it so that when we do open up all our schools and everything is open again, that these words and these messages of hope and that are there. So that's my goal. We'll see how far I can go on it.
And then I have a follow-up on that. So does the state HHS have anything like that? Does they, or DHS, do they have any data that they could, you know, maybe work with all the counties on? I mean, if this is a glaring problem across the state, and I'm assuming it's also across the country, I think we should look at even a federal, something like a national suicide hotline. Do they have data on this? Can we team up with them?
Yeah.
And then also, when you're talking about teaming up and doing things, how about our local clergy as well, like throughout the county? I think that would be, and maybe our counseling services. I know locally we have like Family Innovations and places like that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can do, but most people don't know about it. So, you know, our marketing campaign that we did years ago, we really worked hard. We had speakers, which can't do right now, and then we went to every community. We had a music video. We did a mailing. We had resources in the schools. We did a huge push, and it cost about $65,000, and it was all donated. So I'm working with Health Partners and Alina and trying to figure out how we're going to do this again, because when we look at all the stress that everybody's under right now, just with COVID and everything that's going on at that, you take the mental health issues that are going to be coming with our professionals, and then add on to this, and then when you look at the department, for example, the medical examiner's department, when you look how our scenes and everything, I mean, you're talking law enforcement are dealing with death almost now on a daily basis. That is not what I mean, I love working with the law enforcement, but I'd see them like once every couple of weeks. But now we see each other all the time. And so that is cumulative stress, and it's cumulative stress on our system. So we have this here glaring thing of teenage suicide, but we also have to look at our professional staff and how we're going to make sure that everybody buys into a message of emotional intelligence and emotional wellness, because people aren't signing up for this work, and it's not because it's, you know, yes, it's a lot to work in environments where you're constantly under stress, but it's a lot easier to make a lot more money doing other stuff. So our choices aren't choices that people make to serve this way. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the first weekend in December was a very tragic weekend here in St. Croix County. That there weekend alone cost taxpayers here in St. Croix County, just from my department, over $15,000. And that there was in autopsies and transports and scenes. And, you know, those type of incidents are very traumatic to everybody involved. And it was almost the same people that were engaged in every single act. So that was that there was a very costly weekend, and it's part of the, you know, being with the interstate and having through traffic. That's what happens. But you know, we have to do the best we can and know that a lot of times, you know, the medical examiner's office, we don't have a choice. We have to do autopsies. We try to be as fiscally responsible as we can be, but autopsies are not something, that is all we have right now, is autopsies. So to do forensics investigations. So that there, I just want everyone to be clear about that. And then finally, we had a incident last week where we were called to it was a COVID-related death. My investigator was exposed to 9 people who had COVID. Luckily, we have really good systems we have our own PAPR system, so we've worked really hard to make sure that my staff is safe. And then right after that, she was called to another scene, and she called me and she's like, what do I do? I was just exposed and I haven't been able to decontaminate myself. What do I do? And so we called the hospital and we talked it over, and luckily it was a facility death, but she was able to do her investigation virtually. So the doctor went through and did everything through telehealth, and we were able to do, and so technology, we're seeing how technology is changing everything, and the hospital in question was very grateful because they did not want someone coming into their hospital that they knew was exposed and that. So that was an exciting thing for us to be able to see this. You know, of course that isn't going to work at every scene, but it did work. And for facilities, we were very happy about how that went. So other than that we're going to be plucking along for 2021, and you know, we're already at 18 cases, so it's looks like we're going to have a busy year.
Any other questions for the medical examiner? I don't see any.
I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had a question. Sorry, just a quick one.
Oh, absolutely.
I was going to ask it during the suicide discussion, but I think it's also the schools, of course, but the guidance counselors and getting more counselors in schools too. I mean, when you talk about policymakers, this gets to a bigger issue in terms of funding for those sorts of things, and that's beyond us here. But just having people that can keep track of students a little more closely is huge. Mm-hmm. And thanks for your work, Patty. We appreciate you a lot.
Oh, thank you.
Any other questions? And I'd echo the last sentiments as well. Thank you for everything you and your staff do. Oh, I'm sorry, the sheriff.
No, I just had a quick question for Patty. Patty, that homicide stabbing, is that counted in your December number since they were transported? And I know we had another overdose that was also transported over to Regions. Do those numbers reflect that other involvement that you had, which may not result in a statistic for this count?
Yes, if you go to the slide that says referral, Minnesota death with Wisconsin investigation, we had 3 of those. And those come to us, and that's in the December case breakdown. Those come to us in 2 different ways. We can either get a referral from law enforcement, or if the decedent died in Minnesota and is brought here to be cremated, we have to sign off on that cremation. So we get all the records as to the cause and manner, so that if there is something that, if it, let's say it is a drug overdose, then I will call the law enforcement and say, hey, did you know that there was a drug overdose in your town? And they will say, yes, I did, or no, I did not. And then we can get the information that way. So those cases are increasing also. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I know we had that overdose. Yeah, we had that overdose that went over to Regions, and I don't know if you even knew that she had died, because we surely didn't. They didn't notify us.
Nope.
They gave life-saving measures across, and we thought they would notify us that they pronounced her there because of our potential crime scene here. And it was days later when we did a follow-up to check on her status with the family. The family notified us that she had passed.
Yeah.
I believe an investigator contacted you then. So, yeah, that state line sometimes causes a ripple for all of us. So,
Yeah, it does. But
Seeing no more questions, thank you again, Penny. I'm going to circle back real quickly to the item number 2 on our agenda. Carl Anderson has gotten out of his trial upstairs and has joined us. I'm not going to ask Carl, he's all of 2 days on the job, and we're going to adjourn here in just a few minutes, but we wanted to introduce Carl and let him introduce himself. And if he had any one-over-the-world comments to make about the district attorney's office, we'd welcome them. Otherwise, we'll look forward to seeing Carl on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. And Carl.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad I was able to make it for the tail end here. So I've been here before covering for Mike, but today's my first day as the district attorney, so I'm excited for that. We're fully staffed now. We hired my replacement for my assistant DA position. He's a prosecutor from Shawano County with 2 years experience, so he's hit the ground running. I'll just say really quickly, I think the biggest thing we'll be dealing with, our office, in the next months is the challenge with the backlog of jury trials because of COVID. We have a huge amount of cases that are set, stacked trials every day, almost every day for the next 3 months. So that's going to be a huge challenge. Not all of them will go because we're only running in one courtroom. But hopefully we'll be able to get a hand on that this year, and hopefully it won't continue into the next year, but that's going to be the biggest challenge, is the big backlog of jury trials.
Excuse me. Are there any questions for Carl? Seeing none, Carl, thank you for joining us. And I'm sorry, Shelby, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Sorry.
Sorry, not a question. Just welcome to the job, Carl.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Again, thanks, Carl. Next item up is our request for future agenda items. I'll just make one quick observation. I know that with the coming year and lots of different issues that people face, we probably need to at least consider if this is still a good time to meet. With all the jury trials coming up, this room is often used at this time, and there may be commitments that people have in the coming year, and so as we, over the next couple of weeks, I'll try to consult with everybody to see if this is still a good time or if another time seems to be better. Supervisor Burney.
Yeah, I was just hoping that we could put on the agenda, if Patty, you could bring that campaign that you put together, and then if we can just put something like how the results went, and if you feel like there's anything that needs to be changed on that, and if you need our help with anything regarding that. If that would be okay, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Any other items at this point? Seeing none, the next item is announcements and correspondence, and I'll simply note we had one item of correspondence from the staff of the dispatchers, and they were wishing everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas. So thank you very much for that. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 4th. Again, I'll try to get word out to all the committee members in the next day or two to consult about appropriate times for that meeting and future meetings. But as of now, it's February 4th at our typical 8 o'clock time. Are there any other comments from anybody?
I just want to apologize for the slight delay, the connectivity issues, but certainly not to the extent of what Judge Needham has been addressing with e-filing and such, but I apologize for being a minute or so late.
We've all gone through that. Thank you very much. With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.